So we have college savings opportunities, and then the 50,000 foot level, these ways of saving for college could be either taxable or non-taxable. Obviously, the non-taxable would be the more attractive way to go. There are ways of saving that you can do on your own that would involve tax issues, and those are out there. What we're going to be talking about today are the non-taxable opportunities, especially through 529 plans. In comparing taxable versus non-taxable and comparing 529 programs to other ways, there are advantages definitely advantages for using a 529 program. The biggest one is what Congress legislated in the late 90s through the Taxpayer Relief Act, which exempts from taxation the annual appreciation of the fund. So you put money in when the student is 2 years old, and every year you add additional money, but every year the fund grows through appreciation. That appreciation is not taxable in a 529 program. Finally, when the distribution event takes place, when you're drawing money out of the 529 to pay for college bills, that is not a taxable event too. So there's two very favorable federal tax considerations. When the federal government established the legislation, it was to encourage every state in the country to offer a 529 program. 529 programs currently exist in virtually all of 50 states. Some states offer more than one program. Some offer 2 or 3 or even more. The states that offer all the states that offer the programs typically have also favorable tax considerations for state tax purposes. So they're very, very favorable for the individual family in terms of not having to have the tax liabilities for any appreciation and distributions. Another important point we've already made is that the 529 programs remain in control of the owner of the fund right through the student's college experience. So if that particular student doesn't need all the money, or chooses not to go to college, or for some other reason doesn't need the money, the owner can move the money to a sibling, to the student's sibling. The owner can move it to a first cousin. The owner can move it to his spouse or her spouse, or actually use it himself or herself. There's a lot of flexibility with 529 programs. One of the other major points about 529 programs, compared to other federal ways of saving, including Coverdell accounts and U.S. savings bonds, is that those other programs have income caps under which you have to be in order to get the tax consideration. There are favorable tax considerations for Coverdells and for U.S. savings bonds, but you have to be under a certain income. For 529 programs, there is absolutely no income cutoff. No matter what your income, you can receive the favorable tax considerations. That's a very major plus for 529 programs. When we look at 529 programs, sometimes we see the word college savings. This is a reference to kind of another 50,000 foot point. There are two ways of providing 529 resources. One is what we call 529 savings plans. The other one is what we call prepaid tuition plans. 80% of the 529 assets nationally are currently in 529 savings plans. 20% are in prepaid tuition plans. The term savings could be viewed by some as a misnomer because they're really more investments, and there is risk, as there would be in any investment, both with the savings program as well as the prepaid tuition programs provided by states. There is some risk. There's one exception to this risk, and that is the program which we are currently involved with very significantly, and that's called the Private College 529 program. Unlike any other of the 529 programs nationally, which do to some degree have a level of risk, the risk is that the state agency may not be able to provide the commitment for some reason. The commitment for the Private College 529 program is that the schools involved in supporting this program will be the guarantors, and it is a 100% guarantee. So the Private College 529 program has been established under the auspices of the legislation that had to be amended to allow a consortium of schools, and currently there's 270 some private institutions who are involved in the Private College 529 program. And each of these institutions provides the guarantee, and we'll hear more about that in a minute. The other important point here to consider with 529 programs is that there are fees involved. There are annual fees and typically very reasonable minimal monthly or regular payments that you need to make to stay in the program. But being involved in a 529 program typically has some fees, annual fees attached. And the fees can be modest, 1%. They can be as high as 5.75% currently. One exception to fees is the Private College 529 program. There are no fees. So, how do you go about selecting a plan? Well, in general, again, 80% of the programs nationally are college savings programs, 20% are prepaid tuition programs, and finally, at the top of the graphic that you are currently seeing, the Private College 529 program is one that's a prepaid tuition program. In other words, it's a guarantee of a certain amount, a certain percentage of the tuition of the school that you attend. And we'll hear more about how that works in a minute. When you go about looking for a 529 program, you can do it directly with the agency providing the resources, and that would reduce any fees because you would be doing it yourself. And some of the states that offer 529 programs actually offer some incentives for people to go directly to the agency. If you're using an advisor, which is the other way to go, you're taking advantage of the expertise of the advisor, and that's what the person does for a living, but you're going to pay a fee for his service or her service. The other advantage of using an advisor is that typically, if it's a financial advisor for the family, that family circumstances are going to be well known by the advisor. So what does that family have for retirement aspirations? What are their dreams for how they'd like to live someday? What are the other needs of the family in terms of other children, in terms of their health? All of these things would come with an advisor. The disadvantage of going directly is that you may not have the time or expertise or ability to understand the differences between one program and another. The disadvantage of going with the advisor, of course, is that there are fees and they could be fairly substantial. So in general, there's a couple of ways to set up a 529 program. You can set up what we call a static approach, where you set up the program and at whatever age the student might be, and over the period of time, whatever asset allocations that were set up initially would continue throughout the program. The other way to go is what we'd call an age-based option that most of the states are going to provide, which when you set up the program, let's say it's a young 2-year-old person, every year that 2-year-old gets closer to college, there would be an adjustment in the asset allocation, so there'd be less risk as the student gets closer to college. This next graph, I think, dramatically illustrates the cost of paying fees, the potential cost. And there's an illustration here that uses as an example a $2,000 annual contribution. We're going to assume in the example an appreciation value of 5% annually, and we're also going to assume a 1.5% fee, the annual fee that's going to be charged. So over a 20-year period, what would this look like? Well, if you looked at the top line, the green line going across, this is what the gross contribution plus the appreciation would have reached over a 20-year period. However, if you're using an advisor charging 1.5%, the net value available through the 529 program is going to be less, and that's what the blue line shows. And then if you want to look at the dotted red line below, that's that's trying to reflect the difference between the two over the 20 years. Using this example of $2,000 a year, what that difference amounts to at the end of 20 years is $10,000. When you think of it, you could have had 5 more years of payment at $2,000 a year if you weren't paying that fee.